All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this Farminar. I know we're competing with the State of the Union tonight. Um, yeah, appreciate you taking the time to tune in here. Um, we are going to be talking about beginning farmer barriers and strategies. I'm Steve Carlson. I'm a staff member at Practical Farmers of Iowa. Like I said in the chat box there, it's fun to see where you guys are tuning in from. Sometimes we're all local Iowans here, PFI members, and sometimes not. So if you'd like to share that, pop that in the chat box. I'm here in Ames, Iowa. PFI is based out of Ames. And so tonight we've got Bill and Stacey Borrenpohl of Woven Strong Farm, and they are way over in eastern Iowa, and they raise meat and eggs on that farm. And then we've also got Jennie Quiner of Dogpatch Urban Gardens, who grows fruits and vegetables on just a quarter of an acre in Des Moines city limits, so central Iowa. And we've got both Jennie and then Bill and Stacey tonight, who have gone through PFI's savings incentive program for beginning farmers and or are currently enrolled, and they're willing to share some of the barriers that they've faced while getting started with their farms. So that's what we're going to hear about tonight. But before I turn it over to Jennie, who will be speaking first, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Practical Farmers of Iowa. So this is part of our Farminar series. We've been doing these since 2009. We've got nearly 150 of these webinars recorded in our archives. There's a link at the bottom of the screen there to go dig through our recorded presentations from past Tuesday nights. This is the lineup for the next 6 Tuesdays in a row. Next week is going to be on cover crops. The week after that is creating pollinator habitat with native seeds. And you can see the rest of them. So mark your calendars for any of those topics that look interesting for you. So if you don't know about PFI, Practical Farmers of Iowa has been around for more than 30 years, and we are a nonprofit. We are a member-based, farmer-led organization, and we're proud to be farmer-led. And we're a big tent. So just like you saw with our Farminar topics, we've got a really diverse membership, and we offer a really diverse programming for our members. So we do stuff on livestock, we do stuff on row crops, and we do stuff with fruits and vegetables and everything in between. So we welcome everyone, farms of all sizes and all enterprises, and we try and provide programming that's interesting and useful for all farmers in Iowa. And our mission at PFI is brand new. We just had board approval for this. Our mission is equipping farmers to build resilient farms and communities. So we've shortened it down and tightened it up a little bit, and it's nice, short and sweet mission, equipping farmers to build resilient farms and communities. And we work towards our mission with a variety of activities. One of the ways that PFI initially started out working towards this was through our on-farm research, or our cooperators program, where we help farmers design and implement replicated on-farm research trials on issues that they are curious about on their farms, and we still do that. Cooperators program is a major part of PFI. Beyond that, we host all kinds of events, whether it's on-farm field days across the state, our annual conference that happened just last week in Ames, or workshops and socials across the state where we focus on farmer-to-farmer education. And this Farminar series right here is exactly that. This is farmer-to-farmer education. So we've got Bill and Stacey and Jennie all willing to share about their farms and their experience getting to the point where they are right now. One other event that I wanted to highlight real quick that we just announced is that February 16th in Marshalltown, we've got an orchardist gathering coming up, which is just an informal gathering to network and talk shop for growers of apples, pears, stone fruit, cherries, all that stuff. So RSVP to me. I'm Steve at practicalfarmers.org. I'll pop that in the chat box later. RSVP to me if you want to come and let us know what you're interested in about when it comes to orcharding, and we can make a day out of the topics that farmers suggest. So again, this is farmer-led stuff. Beginners and experienced orchardists are welcome. We've got, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Tom Wall and Kathy Dice of Red Fern Farm. They're going to be there. Dean Henry of Berry Patch Farm is going to be there. That's probably 90 years of experience between those two farms right there. So it's fun to get together with people who have been doing it for a long time. So those are some of the activities that you can plug into at PFI. And you can join as a member. PFI is a member-based organization, so if you join, there's a number of member discounts, but really you're joining a network of people who want to help other farmers, who want to see sustainable agriculture in Iowa, and people who are willing to help each other improve their efficiency and their stewardship and their profitability. So you can learn more about that on the website or talk to me, but we'd love to have you join PFI if you're not already a member. So a couple of rules before I turn it over here. That chat box, it looks like you guys are getting the hang of that. Go ahead and let us know where you're tuning in from. Like I said, I'm here in Central Iowa in Ames. That chat box is also a great place for you to ask your questions to our speakers. So feel free to ask questions as we're going. Try to keep them on topic so we're not really too distracting. Ask your clarifying questions while our speakers are going, but we are going to have a good chunk of time after the two presentations to ask all other questions. So just be respectful of our presenters, be respectful of other people in the chat box, but do take advantage of it. We want this to be interactive. Another thing is that in that bottom left corner of your screen, there is a little poll there. I'm asking people just to check the box. If you have a few people watching this Farminar from your one computer, that helps us get a more accurate head count about how many people are watching. So take that poll in the bottom left corner to let us know how many people are tuning in with you. We appreciate that. Also, we really like to get feedback. So there's a link right there. That SurveyMonkey link is for tonight's presentation. You can click that now and it should open in your web browser, and you can take that at the end of the presentation. Just let us know what you thought about tonight, but also that's your chance to give us the topics and the speakers that you want to hear about in the future. So sometimes that turns into a field day, sometimes that turns into a conference session, and sometimes that's a Farminar. So let us know what you want to hear about, and we're going to try and provide programming for that. I'll put that link in the chat box a little bit later too, but do provide us feedback. I appreciate it. And if you want to get on our Farminar email list for updates on Farminars, there's a link there to sign up for that weekly email. So that's what I've got right now, and Jenny Quiner of Dogpatch Urban Gardens is going to take it over here when I get your presentation up. Jenny, feel free to start it off.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for listening in. Like Steve said, my name is Jenny Quiner, and my farm is called Dogpatch Urban Gardens, and it's located in Des Moines. My contact information is here on this slide, so if at any point you want to email or call, feel free. But let's just kind of dive right in and get going with it. So this is an overhead shot of my farm. This was taken sometime in the fall, but you can see a few things with our setup. I'm going to experiment with this arrow here. So here is what I call our main plot. Then we've got the farm stand, which is right here. We have one high tunnel, which we installed in May, and then we have another grow plot here that's kind of hidden. And then we also have a home right here, which is our Airbnb. So I'll kind of talk about all the different systems that we have, and the main focus are the barriers that we've had so far starting this farm. I've been farming, I just finished my second season, so I am a newbie. Just another visual of how the farm has changed in 2 years. So this is right about when we bought the land. This picture up here, you can see it was just grass. So the previous owners, they were an elderly couple, and they basically just mowed the lawn. But before they were unable to, maintain their land, they used to farm there. So it's kind of cool to go back to where it once began. And you can see in a short amount of time, a lot has changed there. And one other shot, so Google Maps has not updated our farm yet, so it's kind of cool. We can still see what it looks like a couple years ago. So you can see there August 2015 and then where we are now in October. We did have to take down quite a bit of trees, and there was a big transformation in this section of our neighborhood because this home, which is not our home, it's beautiful. I would love if it was my home. That home was built the same time we built the farm. So in this little block, there was a lot of transformation that happened within 2 years' time. Okay, so we kind of refer to the farm as Doug, which is abbreviation for Dogpatch Urban Gardens. So when you see that, that's what we're talking about there. But we are urban. So I grow on about 1/4 of an acre of land. The total plot we own is an acre, but we've got the Airbnb, we've got the farm stand. So about 1/4 of an acre is what I grow on. And we've really tried to diversify our income streams. So we've got the farm stand, which I'll talk about that more, but that's on site. I also sell to restaurants. Those are just some of my restaurant customers there. We have a salad subscription, which is a modified form of a CSA. I sold to a local farmers market. I sell to a local food co-op. I sell to caterers, and then we also have our urban farm stay. So we have multiple different avenues of where our money is coming into the farm. So here's just a breakdown. So I pulled this data in November, so it's pretty up to date. It's changed a touch, but not much. And I know that, well, actually I thought these were going to be smaller. So those, you can pretty much see what that is. So you get the majority of our sales are coming from our farm stand, which is what we want and what we're excited about because we see a lot of potential there. And then, roughly 10% from our restaurants, a small majority from our local food co-op. Right here, the 11% is our salad subscription, and then 7% is our local farmers market. We did this farmers market for 2 years. I've decided not to pursue it next year. I really enjoyed the market and I enjoyed the customers, but it was a Tuesday night. It was another night I was away from my family, and I'll talk about one of our key barriers was the family work-life balance. So we kind of think it's time for us to no longer vend at the market, but now we get to participate and just come and walk around the market. So we're pretty excited about that as well. So just kind of a little overview of the main crops I grow. Greens, roots, tomatoes, peppers, herbs, and microgreens. Our number one seller is our salad mix, and then tomatoes are next. So those are our most profitable crops. You'll notice most of my crops are grown with the idea that I have a short or a small amount of land. And so I'm not growing broccoli or Brussels sprouts, things that are in the ground for a long period of time that take up a lot of space. So I'm pretty intentional with the crops that I grow. Okay, so get to the meat and potato of why we're here. These are the main barriers that I have dealt with as a beginning farmer, and I'll go into each of these in more detail. But land access, startup capital, building a market, work-life balance, production challenges, and then regulations and policies. And the regulations and policies is the big stickler for us right now, and we're dealing with a lot of hardship. So that'll be something I'll talk about at the end. But yeah, let's kind of get into all these barriers. So starting off, access to land. I would say that truly this was not a huge barrier for us. I hear many farmers, and it's a common issue of how do you get the land? And now we own our land, so we bought it. But 2 years ago, I was a high school science teacher, and my husband and I started talking about farming and this urban idea, but it wasn't like we have to do it right away. And so we were just kind of passively looking for land. This plot of land went for sale in our neighborhood. We live 2 blocks away. So it all just kind of worked out in our favor. So we weren't actively looking and saying, we've got to find this plot of land. We just kind of fell into it. And because the land became available, we decided it's time for me to leave teaching and start the farm. So I would say access to land was not a huge hurdle for us. We just kind of fell into it. And I know that doesn't happen all the time. Okay, so startup capital, definitely something that is tough. And anytime you're starting a new venture, a new farm, even a new business, you need to have startup capital. So everyone told us do the FSA microloan. So we thought that's the route we were going to go. And like I say, more details on the next slide. We attempted the microloan and we did not have any luck with it. It was not the right program for us, and I'll explain that more when we get to the next slide. We're just kind of in a unique situation being urban, and I'll get into that a little bit more. We did use quite a bit of our personal savings to get the farm up and running. We were actually saving up to put on a small addition on our home, and then instead of putting that addition on, we bought a farm. So we did have some savings, which was a big help for just, getting the startup capital going. We have a mortgage through our local bank, and that is to use to buy the actual home on our property. And that for the first 2 years, that house was a rental property. So we had tenants that were there for about 18 months, and then we had tenants that were there for about 3 months. And then at that time, that's when we realized it'd be fun to maybe convert it to the Airbnb, and that's what we did. We also have a line of credit through Central Bank, and that line of credit is used mostly for us to stock our farm stand. because we buy items from local producers, sellers, growers at a wholesale rate and then sell them at a retail rate. And so, in order to stock up, so for example, we'll open it, we're not open right now, but we'll open mid May. And when we open, we'll spend, gosh, I'm just estimating, but probably $2,500 right off the chute just to get merchandise to stock the farm stand. And a lot of that goes into our meats. And we like to be fully stocked. So having this line of credit is nice, and we just pay it down as quickly as we can. So we did take on some debt, and we are currently in debt. And we're blessed that my husband has an off-farm job. And so we're using a portion of his monthly income to pay down on the farm debt. We are not at a point with the farm 2 years in where we are paying our farm debt with our farm income. Now, we see that happening pretty soon in the future, but like I said, we're blessed to have the off-farm income from my husband. I don't have an off-farm job, but he does. And then we also pursued the EQIP grant through the NRCS, and that's what got us this high tunnel here. I highly recommend everyone look into that funding because, yes, you have to do some paperwork, and the paperwork can kind of be a headache, but we got $9,800 to build this high tunnel. And as long as we follow their rules for their 4-year time period, we don't have to pay that money back. And so it's something that I highly recommend looking into. And EQIP has funding for other things other than just the high tunnel. So definitely check out what your local area has to offer for that program. Okay, so I mentioned the microloan, and I just want to explain why it wasn't the right fit for us. So I would say first and foremost, the biggest issue is we tried to get the funding before we even started the farm. So we had no seeds in the ground. We had no documentation of our income, and we hadn't filed a Schedule F or anything like that. So when we reached out to our county rep, he said, okay, I hear what you're asking for, but the numbers that he had didn't align with the numbers I was telling him because he didn't, I don't know if he didn't understand, but he didn't fully grasp the idea of this bio-intensive urban farm where we're using every bit of space, we're being really efficient with the land. So he gave us some numbers here, and this kind of gets technical, but based on a quarter of an acre, he told us that we could get maybe $5,400 total if the whole plot was green beans. But if the whole plot was salad greens, we could make $2,300. Now, we made our gross income this year was 75 grand. Now, keep in mind that wasn't all our product because we have the farm stand as well, but these numbers just did not align with our growth system. So nothing against our rep, it's just we didn't have data to show him what we could potentially produce. So if you're pursuing a microloan, just make sure you have those numbers. So that being said, we reached out again last fall because we have some additions coming on, which I'll explain later. And he came out to the farm, was pretty blown away, and said, hey, here's what we can give you. And we were able to get the money, but we decided not to pursue it because there was this added environmental survey fee that we just didn't want to pay the extra almost 4 grand out of our pocket. So we could have got the microloan, but we decided against it. Okay, so whenever you are starting a farm, you have to have a market. I truly think that the growing is not the hard part. I think it's selling your product. And so one thing that was really advantageous, in my opinion, was the fact that we are urban. We're in Des Moines. And so we have a lot of our markets really close by. So 95% of our sales were sold within 10 miles of the farm, which is fabulous because I don't like delivering. And so we didn't have to make a whole bunch of deliveries. I'm not in the car a whole lot. So like I said, we did the Beaverdale Farmers Market, and we did that for 2 seasons. I really enjoyed it because, one, as a new farmer, it's a way to meet people in your community. It's kind of that social equity thing where people learn about me and they learn about who I am. My family would come every now and then, and people would meet my kids. So I mentioned I'm not doing this anymore this season, but I have no regrets for doing it the 2 years I did. At this point, though, financially and the time away from my family, it's not right for us anymore. The restaurants are about 10% of our sales, and I'm really happy with my restaurants that I work with. I would say I have about 5 steady restaurants that I would deliver to weekly during the season, but I have up to 12 that would periodically buy from me throughout the season. Um, Starting off, to establish relationships with the chefs. So, about 2 years ago, when we got the farm up and running, what I would do is in the winter, I grew all these microgreens and I would take them to the chefs as free samples. And it was a way for me to introduce myself to the chefs. And I was always sure to go to the restaurants when they weren't busy. If you show up at a restaurant at lunchtime or at dinner time, chefs don't have time to talk to you. But I would go usually around 3 o'clock, have samples, and introduce myself, tell the chefs about what I was all about, and just establish that relationship. And then throughout the season, I send them a weekly fresh sheet on Sundays, usually around noon. And it basically says, here's what I've got for sale this week. Here's the pricing. It's got instructions of when you need to order, when it will be delivered, and etc. But I would say what my chefs love is consistency. So you always know when they're going to get that fresh sheet. They always know when delivery will be. I always deliver on Thursdays around 10 a.m. And so consistency is really important with chefs, and also constant communication. If you're short on something, don't just tell them when you're showing up. The more you can communicate with them, the better. And then I also think it's important, if I want them to buy from me, I want to go to them and buy their food as well. So when I do get a night out at a restaurant, which doesn't happen much because I have 3 young kids, we're very selective and we like to go to the restaurants that support us because it means a lot for those chefs to see you there as well. So we also started a CSA. Now it's a modified CSA and I call it a salad subscription. And these pictures over here are all just examples of what weekly shares look like. This is modified. I got the idea from a farm in North Carolina called Fair Share Farms, and it really fits the model of the food that I grow. So since I'm not growing a huge diversity of crops, I didn't think it made sense for me to just do your typical CSA because there's not as much, like I said, diversity with what I'm growing. So my setup is everything is salad oriented, and there's 12-week session in the spring and then a 12-week session in the fall. I take summers off. One, because it's difficult to grow a high quality green in the summer. I'm experimenting with new methods, but I like having a little downtime in the summer. But there's either a full plate or half plate, and basically you're getting 1 pound or half a pound of greens, a couple different veggies, and last year I also did microgreens. I've actually ran out of room in my microgreen grow space, so I'm not offering them in the CSA this year, but I'll still sell them at the farm stand. And this has been really popular. We keep it around 25 members, give or take. And this season, I'm pretty much sold out, and I haven't even advertised it yet. It's just grassroots, word of mouth, previous salad subscribers. So it's been a popular item. And then finally, we literally built a market for ourselves, which is our farm stand. It's an on-site farm stand where people are coming to us, and it's about 75% of our income for this last season. So let me get into that a little bit more. So here's a picture of the farm stand. We built a pole barn, and so the front half of the pole barn is the actual farm stand, and it's a finished building. It's drywall. We have electrical and so on, so it looks nice. And then back here, when you go through that door, that's our wash pack area. So we've got the walk-in cooler, tables, root washer, and that sort of thing back in that area. So the building has two purposes: the farm stand as well as the wash pack. So a little bit about the farm stand. So it's basically described as a locally sourced grocer because, like I said, we're selling our product, but then we're also working with other local producers and so on to sell their product as well. So just kind of looking at our shelf, we had maple syrup, we had jams, we had honey, tea, mustard, granola, sauerkraut, etc. And then we have dairy, we have meats, we have eggs. We're trying to be as diversified as possible, and we're bringing people to us on the farm. The main reason we wanted to do this is because the farm stand is family friendly for other families, but more importantly for us, because I've got 3 young boys, and it's easy for them to come be at the farm stand and hang out and work. My 6-year-old loves money right now, so if he's at the checkout counter, people like to give him tips. So, we're starting to incorporate our kids more into the farm. And so it's the idea that I don't have to travel to go to markets anymore. I don't have to set up tents and tables and be in the heat or be in the wind or whatever. the farm stand is a temperature controlled area where I have good quality product, and it's really been wonderfully received by our community. Now, for us to be designated a farm stand, we can only be open 6 months out of the year. So we're open mid-May through mid-November, and there's other regulations we follow in order to be still classified as a farm stand. But the fact that we're urban and we get a lot of traffic really allows this to be successful. Okay, so my biggest challenge in the first 2 years have been work-life balance. And, as a market gardener, you're not just a farmer, you're an entrepreneur. If you think about it, there's so many avenues that you're taking care of, from accounting, which is first on my list right now because I'm in the heart of taxes at the moment, so that's big on my brain. But you're an accountant, you work media, you're doing social media, you are crop planning, you name it. As an entrepreneur, you're doing so much more than just growing. And so I didn't come from a farming background. So honestly, it was kind of a rude awakening. I didn't fully prepare for all of the time that it takes to be a successful business when it comes to farming. And that's a big focus with both my husband and I is making this a business, not just a farm. And there's only 24 hours in a day, and you can't get it all done by yourself. And so, we realized that the first 2 years were tough. So my boys, so Oliver is 6, Walter is 4, and Lewis is 2. When we started this farm, Lewis was just born. We would be out working the farm. He'd be like in a car seat, just hanging out, So what's cool is they're growing up with the farm, but it's been tough. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. But one thing I can say is each year it's getting easier and easier. And I think a lot of that has to do with me personally. I'm getting better with my systems. Because starting off, if I had to go harvest a bed of carrots, I didn't even really know how I wanted to do it, so I couldn't really tell employees how to do it. There was a huge learning curve. But now we're at this point where I'm making SOPs, which are standard operating practices. So if I want a bed of carrots harvested, I can tell my employee to refer to the SOP on harvesting carrots, and they'll know how to harvest them, how much to put in a bunch, how to bunch them in the field, how to wash them, and so on. So I don't have to micromanage everything. So I think that's what I'm getting better at. And I'm not perfect, but the idea of having systems in place. And the same is true for the farm stand. We now have a farm stand manual, and I don't expect like everyone to read the manual, but it guides my employees on if they're running SNAP, how do they run that? Because you run SNAP different than you do a credit transaction. And those sorts of things are in the manual. So if there's a moment where I'm not at the farm, they can still run it and it's going to go smoothly. So I think having those systems in place is so much easier. Hiring the right person. Now, luckily, the fact that we're in a highly populated area, I have been able to get some really good people to work and help me on the farm. I know more rural people can have major issues with employment, but so far I've been really blessed to have good employees to work for me. Be intentional with your work. So if you're at the farm and you have tasks to do, get them done. I think really focus on the task at hand. Try not to let your mind wander has really helped me. And also plan ahead. So I'm about halfway through my crop plan for the 2018 season. And before I get seeds in the ground, I will know what day all my seeds will be planted for the whole year. Because winter's a downtime. In the heart of the summer, I don't want to be trying to think of what I need to plant. I just want to know. So I find a lot of value in planning ahead. And then, production, we've had challenges with production, which I think any farmer has some. But when we got going, we were totally a blank slate. If you think back to that earliest picture I showed you, it was all just grass. And so we had to remove all the sod. And I know there's different ways of getting rid of sod, but we rented a sod cutter and we rolled it up, and it was horrible. We actually ended up hiring people to do it after we did it for a day. We were like, no, thank you. So we hired this job out. And what's kind of cool, we rolled it all up and then just gave it away to free to people in our neighborhood. And so we can drive through our neighborhood and see like where our grass is. So it's kind of a neat literally grassroots way of starting the farm. We had to take down a lot of trees. We had to build fencing. We had to do grading, which our boys loved. Here's a picture of us building the farm stand. So we had to build from scratch, and it's been only 2 years. And so the amount of change that we have done is pretty fantastic in a short amount of time. So this is a fabulous picture of what we dealt with in 2016, our first growing season. We bought the land, and silly us, didn't really think about the grade of the land. We just thought, oh, well, that'll be good. We learned the hard way that that area was prone to flooding. So we had about a third of our beds underwater. Now, luckily, we didn't have major damage like maybe you would think when you see that picture. But we went to a local rental place, rented a sump pump, stuck it in the ground here, and over here is the ditch. So we just pumped all that water out to the ditch. And so by the next morning, we were dry. I mean, obviously we were muddy, but we kind of were okay. But it's actually quite funny because the carrots that were seeded not too far before it flooded, they were the best carrots we've ever grown. And so it made me realize that carrots, you think you water them enough, but then water them even more. So we lucked out with that. But that being said, at the end of the season, we added a drain system because we said, okay, we know this is a problem. We know we don't want to deal with it every season. So let's solve the problem as soon as we can. So we dug a trench. We had these pipes with perforated holes, and we had gravel, and it went all the way out to this. So it kind of went over here, and then we currently now have a lift station here, which pumps all the water out to the drain. At the end of next season, we're going to hopefully harvest that water so that we can reuse it. But after we installed that system, we haven't dealt with flooding since. So there's always going to be issues. How do you tackle them and how do you make them better? And this was an investment. It was about, I think it was about $5,000, but in the big picture, in the long run, it made sense with our system because we don't want to deal with flooding. And then, like I mentioned, I didn't have experience. I went into this without a farming background, and I didn't volunteer on farms. And so I wouldn't highly recommend it, but it's worked for us. So with that, one thing I've really done is place an emphasis on education and consultations. As a previous high school science teacher, I do find value in education. And so this is just kind of a list of things that I have done that I've found very valuable. Starting off, I took Curtis Stone's online course called Profitable Urban Farming, and I found so much value in it, especially as a beginning farmer. If you're a veteran farmer, it may not fit as well for what you need, but also the fact that it's urban really tied into what I needed. This is a picture here of when I went to a conference down in Tennessee in November called Small Farms for Big Change. I've got a lot of value from that conference and was able to connect with a lot of farmers, also get my hands on tools that I had potentially interest in buying. And it was great for me to be able to experiment and try a tool out. For example, a lot of small scale farmers think you need the BCS tractor, and it has a lot of value. But when I got my hands on it, I realized it was too big for me. I'm a female, and I'm not saying I'm just not as strong as a lot of people. And those BCS tractors just drug me around the farm. And so I realized that's probably not the right tool for me. One tool I did get my hands on at this conference that I loved was the paper pot transplanter, and that's something I want to incorporate into my farm real soon. And then these are just some other things that I have done. I think on-farm consultations have a lot of value. Yes, they cost money, but I do think that you're investing in your farm and makes a lot of sense to me. The PFI, I am currently in the savings incentive program. I just finished up my first year. Absolutely love it. If you have questions on it, feel free to ask me. And then, books, conferences, I do find them to be very valuable. Okay, so last barrier, and then I'll pass it over to Bill and Stacey. So we're unincorporated. So we're in our address is Des Moines, but we are not. We don't deal with the city. We deal with our county. And at first, we kind of assumed that would be better. I don't even know why, but unfortunately, we have dealt with some major headaches, and we're really in the thick of it right now with our county. And it's kind of because we're this new type of business for Polk County. There's no other urban farms with an on-site farm stand in the area. And so we're kind of pioneering some policies and regulations which don't really benefit us. One example is when we got the NRCS grant to build the high tunnel, we asked our county if we could run electrical to it, and they told us yes. And so we ran the line, and then about 3 weeks later, they came back to us and said, "Oh, we're sorry, that's not considered a permanent structure. You cannot have electrical to it." And so we're dealing with this a lot where they tell us one thing, and then they talk to other powers that be, and then they change their mind. Now, luckily, we were able to stick with still having the electrical because we already ran it, but that's just one example. Same thing. They're now requiring us to build a public restroom, which a year ago we have an email from them saying, no, we don't need one. So it's just been difficult in this urban setting because agriculture is not common. And unfortunately, we've dealt with a lot of detrimental reliance where we ask the county for input, they tell us something, we act on it, and then they say, oh no, that's not right, or we've changed, and those sorts of things. So we're really dealing with some policy issues. And I don't have any great like suggestions because initially what we thought is the more you ask and the more you communicate with your powers that be, the better. But we relied on them to our detriment. And here's an example of what I'm talking about here. Now, this is a lot, and we're not going to go through all this, but in the 2018 season, our county is requiring us to alter or add over $75,000 worth of infrastructure to our farm. And honestly, there's no way around it. We thought about the legal route, we thought about all these different things. We even thought about shutting the farm down. But we're not going to. We're going to do these things because they will make our farm better, and in the big picture, it'll enhance our farm. But here's just a few things we have to add. A public restroom, which when we started the farm, we were told we do not need one. And it also means a new septic system. They're requiring landscape and fencing, and our parking lot now needs to be ADA compliant. They're also forcing us to change part of our farm stand to make it ADA compliant, and so on. So, like I said, we're looking at a big amount of money, and it's so frustrating because we relied on their input in the first place and they've changed their mind and we're stuck. But here we are. We live to tell about it. So just to kind of give you an idea here of what we'll be adding to the farm this season. So this is the blue is our current farm stand. So you would walk in, here's our big garage door that you walk into. So this whole area in red will be the additions we make, all stem from our requirements from the county. So we'll have 2 public restrooms, and then this whole area here, I'm actually quite excited about because I'm going to have a Rockstar wash pack station. We're going to have a very large walk-in cooler, and in this whole process, we'll be able to have a established food license so that I'll be able to cut and process raw produce to sell at the farm stand. So we'll be able now, once this is all said and done, to have like ready to eat salads and those sorts of things, which I think we have a big market for. So we're taking these issues that our county's putting on us and we're using it as an opportunity to enhance our farm to make it better. And the other cool thing is this will set us up more to be able to host events on the farm, especially having these 2 public restrooms too. Like I said, we're taking this opportunity to make the farm better. And we're going to be launching a Kickstarter campaign soon, and the goal isn't to raise 75 grand by any means. We're using it really as an avenue to tell our story to our community because we feel like we kind of have been done wrong by our county. And so we're just going to use this Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign as a way to rally our community because they've supported us so much already. So I'm just really excited to see when we launch this Kickstarter campaign to see the support and enthusiasm that we get from our customers. Okay, and then here's my contact info. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And I'm going to pass it over to Bill and Stacey.
Excellent, Jenny. That was really great. So Bill and Stacey, I just made those quick edits that you mentioned to your presentation. It might take a second to upload, so I'm going to try and pull that up right now. But if there's questions in the meantime for Jenny, feel free to shout those out. Yeah, I don't know if if you didn't hear me, feel free to ask questions for Jenny right now because this might take just a second to get Bill and Stacey's presentation up. Jenny, though, that's frustrating to deal with all those issues with the county. I did not know that, and sounds like you've got.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's we've been dealing with this for over 6 months, and it's not something that we commonly talk about with like our customers. You know, when they come in and say, "How you doing?" We're not gonna say, "Oh, do you really want to know?"
Yeah,
And so it's that's why I'm kind of excited to get this Kickstarter out there, just to open people's eyes to the struggles we've had.
very
And
true.
we joke that if the we basically at one point said to the county, "Do you really want to shut down a female-ran organic urban farm? Do you think that's going to go over well?" And they've recognized that, and they're trying to work with us, but it's not working that great.
Yeah. Looks like Clara's got a question for you there, Jenny.
All right, let's see. Any soil issues? You know, Clara, I honestly did not have any soil issues. No lead, and we're urban, but we still our neighborhood kind of has a rural feel to it. So I actually have great soil. I don't have issues with runoff from the road just because the way we're oriented, the road is a little higher and everything goes into this lower ditch. So no major issues that I've had. Okay, so Caleb, for the equip, did you have to be already planting in? Yes, yes. So, and that's key. I actually didn't know that starting off, but wherever you're going to build your high tunnel, it has to be considered cropland. And so we couldn't put it just like we had to grow something there for a season before we could put the actual high tunnel there. And it can be something, it could be a cover crop. You could put a row of radishes. It doesn't have to be this big elaborate crop, but you just have to grow something there before you can put the high tunnel in that place.
Yeah, good question, Shins. Um, okay, so Bill and Stacy, it looks like you guys are ready to go, and it's about 7:45 now, so feel free to take, till about 8:15, and then we'll still have a good 15 minutes for questions after that.
Okay, that sounds good, Steve. Thank you. And thank you to Steve for inviting Bill and I to speak tonight. And we certainly enjoyed listening to Jenny. And I think you'll find we have many of the similar kind of storylines, although we raise our different crops in the end. But our storylines are very similar. So I trust you'll find some value in it, whatever all the listeners are doing. So we are Bill and Stacey Borrenpohl. We own Woven Strong Farm located in Jackson County. So we're your neighbor Iowans on the far east side of the state. Our county seat is Maquoketa, just trying to place where we might be for some of you not familiar. We actually live not far out of Dubuque, Iowa, which is really kind of what Bill and I would call home and where both of us work. So we're south of Dubuque and then 45 minutes north of the Quad City. So that sort of gives a concept of where we are. Let's see here. So who are we? This is our family there on the side at the county fair this past summer. So you can see us and our crew. We have 4 children. Their ages actually 8, 10, 12, and 14 right now. Both Bill and I come from families with an ag background. Bill grew up in southern Illinois farm country on a dairy and crop farm. And I grew up living in town, but my dad farmed with my grandparents on a farrow to finish hog operation in Benton, Blackhawk County area, sort of east central Iowa. Both Bill and I have off-farm jobs. Bill's a degree engineer, and then I do work in human resources. And so I work part-time. Bill works more than full-time on his job. So with 6 of us at home, and we keep, as Jenny would spoke to, a very busy paced life with the 4 kids and their activities and just trying to be really active parents for them and our workload. The 6 of us do all the farm work other than hiring some neighbors when we go on vacation or go camping or whatnot.
Yeah, so we chose this lifestyle because Stacy and I had lived around Dubuque here and do some life experiences. We ended up wanting to move back to the farm. We always would go to the county fair and state fair and wonder, could we do something like this or look at the goats or look at the cattle and looking to see how we get our kids back in, or get our kids engaged. And so then we weren't actually actively looking. We did ask a realtor to help us, and she really took that on and found a spot for us that actually wasn't too far away from where we had lived previously. So it was in a area of the country, of the county, that we had friends and had relationships already. So that was helpful. And so we decided to take the plunge and buy the place that would require us to move to our farm. And so we had quite a bit of housing updates to do and to get the farm started.
Let's jump to that.
Yeah. So our farm history, like I was saying, in 2008 and 10, we were dreaming and planning and going to the fairs and looking around, thinking about how we want to raise our kids and what we wanted to provide for them. And in 2011 is when we found the farm. We purchased 5 acres in the house, and then we also were able to use some of the ground around us, and we've been able to capitalize on that pretty extensively sometimes. 2012, we were able to move out here, and that's really when we started the farming. That's when we bought our first 2 cows and calves. We got 5 hogs started and bought a bunch of chickens, and then tried to start investing how to figure out to raise goats. We put fence up, all that good stuff. And then in 15, that's where we purchased some acres around us. And then that's from the land that this farm came out of. And so we were able to, and we were just able to acquire some ground we were working with and then improve that. So, okay. Yeah. Okay, so for our current operations, we raise pork and beef, goat meat, and eggs. That's our primary products that we sell off the farm. We do most of our business is through direct sales, and so what we mean by that is working direct with the customer, that we would deliver the animal to the locker, and then we take care of all the transactions with the locker. So the customer doesn't even, if they don't ask, they wouldn't even know really where the meat would go, but we do tell them, of course. But then we take care of the cut sheet while working with the customer, deliver that to the locker. The locker calls me if they got any questions, and then the locker calls me when the meat's ready to go. And then we plan a delivery schedule on Saturdays. And usually that's between 4 to 5 Saturdays a year for maybe 6 hours is spent delivering our meat, which would be quarters, halves, and wholes to our buyers. And that's our primary form of our business. We also do offer some bundled meat sales, and we've started experimenting more with that in the last year, looking that customers may not want to buy an entire half or whole or a quarter, and so we tried to see what the bundled business could provide to us. And then we also last year worked with our Monday night farmers market. That was the first time we tried that. We have a private label through one of our lockers, and with that we can then sell individual quantity of meat at a farmer's market. So, but we also work with 2 lockers. Like I said, one has our private label, and the other locker does primarily halves and wholes. And so I have good relationships with both those lockers and use them for our advantage here on the farm.
And we're fortunate. We have actually several lockers. We know that isn't true for all producers in the state of Iowa. We had several to kind of choose which ones we could work through, and the 2 that we work with are probably a 40-minute drive, and that's mostly because you're toting a trailer, and we consider that a reasonable drive. We've had really good relationships with both. Bill has gone over and watched them process our animals, just kind of learn from them. They'll answer a lot of questions, help us out if customer needs a last-minute change. So we consider ourselves fortunate to have good relationships with our lockers. So we've grown our breeding stock for both our beef as well as our meat goats. In fact, last year we seemed to only throw does on the goat side, so our goat herd got kind of quite a bit bigger this last year. And then we'll talk later about our facilities and just how much that's changed over the last several years. Things that were very hard at the start and kind of cobbled together have just flowed a lot easier. And then currently we're talking to neighboring farmers. We're kicking around doing some niche pork operations, and actually I see there's a future Farminar on that we'll likely be listening to. So just we're always learning, I guess, is kind of what I'd like to end that slide with. So I'll let
Hey,
Bill speak for
Stacy.
this. Similar to Jenny. Yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
yeah.
you're just starting to fade out volume-wise a little bit there, so I don't know if you'd moved a little bit, but
Oh, what?
just a heads up, we're starting
I
to
might have.
lose your volume a little.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll focus on that going forward. Sorry about that, Steve. Thanks for letting me
There we
know.
go.
So I'll let
No
Bill
problem.
speak to this. This is similar to what Jenny added. Is a few years old of a Google map of our place. This is our 1940s farmhouse here, and then the property that we own, and also kind of barter for.
Okay, so to kind of give you a sense of how we do our pasturing and how we set up our place, the red outline is what we actually own. The green line, the green area is basically what I have really focused on in terms of our rotational grazing. I'm looking at mob grazing, but we've been doing a managed intensive grazing, generally a 3 to 5 day rotation. And if it's clear enough, you can kind of see our herd at the time in 2015 when this was probably taken. You can see our herd sitting right here in the different paddocks that we've been experimenting with. I haven't done grazing all the time, but I've kind of worked into that and have enjoyed learning more about it. The orange line here is our sacrificial pasture. That's where we clamp things down when we need to. And then this area right over in here is going to be our goat area. That's been some recently purchased ground. And I'm sorry, yeah, right over here is where we want to put our goats. Been putting some fence up in through there. And then the rest of the area here that's in the red is really where we trouble getting that. Are you there, Steve?
Here we go, Jenny. Sarah's got a question about your farm stand.
Okay, so, and I'll just start off by saying every place is different. And so, my scenario will be different than yours. But when we first bought the land, we reached out to the county before we even bought the land and we said, here's what we want to do. We want to grow crops. We want to rent this property. We want to have an on-site farm stand. And they said, that's fine. You're still going to be zoned residential, but they acknowledge agricultural uses. And so for us to be a farm stand, like I mentioned, 6 months out of the year is how long we can be open. 50% of our product has to be produced or grown within our county. There were requirements on signage, which they basically had to be affixed to the building and it had to be a certain size. And then there were requirements on parking, and basically parking couldn't interfere with thoroughways or anything like that. So those were the main requirements. And so it didn't matter if it was a building or out of a truck, just as long as you fit into that mold. Now, I think that a lot of our, being in Iowa, I think a lot of these regulations were first set up for people that were selling sweet corn out of the back of their truck. And we're obviously doing something way beyond that. And so the initial purpose of the farm stand regulations really we're stretching that, and I think that's where a lot of the issues with regulation come in, because we're definitely not just selling sweet corn out of a truck. So hopefully that answers your question for you, Sarah. Caleb and Jacqueline, do you use crop rotation? Do you use a program? I do crop rotate, definitely. My program is I use Google Drive. So I'm very so I don't use anything like Tend or any of those bigger programs. With the fact that I'm a smaller scale, I think that I can manage it just using the Google Drive with Excel and those sorts of things. But yes, I do definitely rotate my crops and am very specific about where I'm planting things and very intentional with that. Tyler, how profitable was your CSA? Is the amount of time, energy, effort you put into it worth it? So I think we made around $9,000 with our CSA, and that's just with the upfront sales. But what that did is, so people would come to the farm stand every Thursday to pick up their CSA shares, and majority of people that came in to pick up their shares also bought other items from the farm stand. So, eggs, meats, milk, and so on. So I definitely find that it was worth the energy and so on for it because of the added sales that it gave us. And also, our CSA members are really our biggest fans. They're the ones that are telling their friends and letting people know about this great product they're getting. So, even though our CSA is small, I think it's totally valuable for my farm. And I don't think it's too much added effort or energy because we're still growing those crops, we're still packaging them. So, in my mind, totally worth it for my system.
Perfect, Jenny. Thank you for filling a little time. It looks like we've got
No
Bill and
problem.
Stacey. Bill and Stacey, your microphone back and working, or is everything okay? Yep, yep.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Steve, can you? Okay. Okay,
Yep.
so Steve, what we're going to do is we're going to just go ahead and continue on where we're at. I apologize to everyone for that interruption. My deepest apologies for that. So, but I'll go ahead and start to pick up here on the PowerPoint. So what I was saying is that this green arrow shows where our goats, we're going to have a goat area down here. We find goats are very like brush and are excellent grazers with the cattle, but do like their own brush area. And this area next to the county road has a lot of brush in it, so it'd be nice for them to work that area over the next few years. The rest of this area that's within our red area is ground that we're improving. Have learned over the time there's a lot of cedars back up in here. Cedars suck a lot of water out of the ground, and I've been cutting a lot of them back to reclaim this as fruitful pasture ground. So that's a long-term project I've been working on. And then the areas, the arrows to the blue arrows over to the right and up to the northwest here. Those are areas where we graze, and we found that we can graze a lot of waterways and other areas that you wouldn't normally get into, and it's hard to get a tractor into them too. So we've been able to make it a win-win situation with our with the guy that owns the ground around us and also his crop farmer renter to graze waterways and so forth, and actually do a lot of reclamation of that ground by cutting trees back, putting our animals on there, doing some rotational grazing to cut back the weeds. So anything we can to use that ground and to basically feed our cattle off of someone else's ground. And so that just, at the end of the day, saves us money. It's a win-win for them because they get ground reclamation, and the place looks better because it's not overgrown. So that's the way we've set up our farm. Our farm is actually out of a 160-acre farm, which is a fairly bluffy area. So we are blessed in the sense that there's a lot more grazing ground than just straight row crop. Okay, so some of our barriers to our initial plan was, it took a lot of time, and it took literally years. It was mentorship from conventional farmers. That's another area that we had a barrier, but part of our initial plan was mentorship from some conventional farmers. I worked with a guy for quite a while, and actually learned a lot. And his name was Gary. He did some excavator, brought the excavator out for us, and it helped us put a water line in that had frozen in one of the winters. And that's my one son as he's trying to dig underneath the fence there as we put the water line in. We developed a wide range of networks of relationships. A lot of my neighbors I know, and that's the way that you can learn things about the ground, learn things about the way they do work up here. Also borrow equipment, buy fence posts, stuff like that. So you work to develop a wide work of relationships. And we graduated a year or so from the SIP program. And Greg, we worked with a guy named Greg who was a grazer. I went up and visited him up in Northwest Iowa, and really learned a lot about management intensive grazing from him. He'd been able to take some ground and improve it tremendously over about 20 years of doing some grazing operations up there. You can see this is our herd of cattle right here up behind our house, trying to graze. Actually, I think there we were grazing the yard. One year we tried where we didn't cut the grass in the backyard for a while and let the cattle graze it. It worked so-so. So, okay. So another barrier that we had, was capital. And so, of course, that's something everyone has to deal with to obtain capital. We both have off-farm jobs, which helps to make sure that the farm can progress. And I would say the off-farm jobs also help us a lot with being inefficient and learning how to be efficient. So that way the farm can grow legs underneath it and start to contribute positively from a net worth perspective, but also from a cash flow perspective. So we saved money for years and put into a startup fund that we just let grow, and when the time was right, we were able then to move that money out and move it into buying a tractor. Bought a tractor out of Michigan, and found what worked for us, and then bought that. So we saved our money. Ongoing operating funding. Our farm is self-funding. Covering the overheads is probably the hardest part, and also learning what your overheads are and learning how to manage them, identifying them, and being receptive to when you're just making purchases at Tyson's or wherever that may be. That's all adds overhead, and so. So that's kind of the next challenge, is to really be funded so that you can overcome your overheads also. Capital purchases. We have, like I said, we have bought some ground. We used a private local bank for that, a rural bank. We found a lot of the city banks didn't quite understand what we were trying to do, and that's outside of their realm. That's fine. So we worked with a bank in Makokata, found an ag lender there. We also we were able to take advantage of the microloan. Later, in around the 15 era, they changed the rules. The USDA did, so that the microloan could be used to purchase ground, and so that actually was a big benefit. A lot of paperwork. It cost us some money to do that, and I don't know if I would do it again. I say that it's just, you got to be aware that there's a lot of hoops to jump through there. But we did it, and it helped us. But it really was a pain. We came into even just our knowledge of being able to understand surveying. They started talking to our lawyer, which started racking up the bills, and it got kind of expensive because of just questions they didn't understand. So that was, like I said, that was probably the learning curve in there. It is cheap money, but it is a pain. It can be a pain. But we've also tried to do some capital purchases also by just saving up and trying to, and then also just being smart about the way we purchase, not brand loyal, just simply you look at what you need and you go from there.
The only last comment I would make about the capital purchases, and maybe this is some of what Jenny was alluding to, the lender that we initially dealt with at the FSA office just did not really get what we were doing. I don't think he was fond of it or understood it, so it required, honestly, a bit of perseverance. We had been in operation for a couple of years when we went to see him, and the second time I know we went in, I brought our financial statements, and I think that, I think it surprised him that we actually were keeping books, and he really just didn't think we could sell our meat for what we were selling it for. And so data helped convince him, although I think even then he was still a bit skeptical. So my message to people, usually if I hear they're going to their FSA office, is be persistent, because they weren't necessarily cheerleaders in the process. So I'll add that comment. So we also obviously need a customer base, so we can produce meat, but we need people to buy it. This would be probably a difference with Jenny's comments. We're just in different parts of the state, so it's both a challenge, and we also see it as an opportunity. Dubuque is a town of, 70,000 people. It's a mix of blue and white collar. I mean, there is the hospitals and IBM and John Deere. So you have some of that, but there's also, it's smaller scale food scene, kind of a newly growing food scene. And so it's not everybody that understands what it is you're doing or the price point in which you're operating. So that is definitely a challenge. And we also live in Jackson County, a very blue-collar town. So it's not customers around every corner that know what you're doing. A lot of value